All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to another Deepvue tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about a very highly requested topic, and that is setting and using Anchored VWAPs here in the Deepvue platform. And Anchored VWAP stands for Anchored Volume Weighted Average Price, and essentially it kind of draws a line in the sand that determines based on price action as well as volume, what is a potential very key level that determines whether buyers or sellers are in control from a certain point in time. So just to use an example right off the bat to kind of show it, if we're thinking about this base here, we've got a prior uptrend, we start to pull back and form a drawdown. As soon as this bar kind of closes and we start to see a breakdown of this consolidation and we start declining below these levels, we can draw an anchored VWAP from the point where the base really gets started. So, once we're at this level, at this day here, we're able to click this point using the anchored VWAP, and that kind of sets your line in the sand that from the start of the base, which is really this bar right here, who's in control below the line, below the anchored VWAP, which is in orange here. Sellers are in control for the most part. Above the line, when we finally break above that line, sellers have regained control from that point. And to calculate it, it takes into account the price action as well as the volume on certain days. So high volume days will matter a little bit more, but it's taking the average of all those volume weighted average prices and creating this line right here. And if we click the line here and go over to settings, let's click that. And if we go ahead and click the line and click settings, you can see that the source right now is open, high, low, close 4. So it's taking into account all those different values. This is kind of the recommended setting here. You could calculate based on just one of these, but we want as much information as possible to kind of take into account a full day's price action. So that's kind of the standard that we use. And you could have, of course, alter the look and feel of Anchored VWAP. I like an orange just because it stands out nicely on my charts, but you can change the color, you can change the thickness of the line, all of that, as well as the visibility on different time frames like any other indicator here in the Deepvue platform. And before we move any further, I just want to mention that when we're talking Anchored VWAPs, we also, of course, have to mention a fantastic resource for using them, and that is Brian Shannon. He's written a book completely on the topic. We'll link his Twitter down below. I recommend checking him out on Twitter, giving him a follow, and of course, checking out his book. If you really want to go in depth, today is more about, just implementation in Deepvue rather than strategies. If you really want the in-depth, strategies, setups, entry tactics, all of that using this indicator, I recommend checking out Brian Shannon, as I mentioned. With that said, let's dive in deeper into accessing the Anchored VWAP, and then we'll touch a little bit more on setups, tips and tricks that I found, ways I use the Anchored VWAP, where I like to anchor it to, and all that good stuff. So first things first, let's say we don't have an Anchored VWAP set. What we want to do, and let's close the drawings just to start completely from scratch. What we want to do is open up our drawings tools by clicking this here in the top bar. And then we want to navigate to basically the fourth from the top here rather. And actually that's the fifth from the top. And you want to click this arrow here, and this is under forecasting and measurement tools. And then you want to navigate down to Anchored VWAP. And if you're going to be using this indicator a lot, and I certainly do, I like to favorite it, and that way it shows up right there in your quick access toolbar. So if I unfavorite it, you can see it disappears from that. If I favorite it, you'll always be able to quickly access it, click, and then you can anchor it to any point that you want. But let's say you just want to activate the tool, you go ahead and give this a click. Then depending on where you want to anchor it to, we can anchor it to this gap down here. There we go. Now we've got it anchored, and to delete it, basically you want to click the line and press delete. It's as easy as that. And since I added it to my favorites toolbar, if I want to access it again, all I have to do is click here, and like I said, it's as easy as that. And that's how you draw an Anchored VWAP here in the Deepvue platform. Okay, so with that covered, and also how to edit the colors, all of that, we've talked about that. Let's dive a little bit into how I personally like to use this and the key levels that I like to anchor and Anchored VWAP to. So there's only a few kind of main instances that I like to use the Anchored VWAP, and this is always for me, more of a secondary indicator, looking at market structure, looking at the moving averages. That's kind of my primary indicator. But the Anchored VWAP does a really excellent job in certain situations of defining another very key level that is potentially resistance, potentially support, and it's just something to be aware of as you're trading, no matter really what your style. And that's because, as we showed, from the top of a base, which is one of the key levels that I like to anchor it from, you can see that all these rallies failed. So if you're looking to buy this breakout, you want to be aware of this level that maybe, a lot of sellers are watching this level, and, could lead to it failing. So you want to be aware of that and potentially selling into that, rather just kind of hoping, letting the stock draw down and just resuming the basing process. Same with here, it fails here, pretty much fails here and fails here as well. So this is just a level to be aware of, just like the 50-day moving average, just like a key support or resistance line. It's just something that you can incorporate into your process to help you manage risk and also manage expectations at the same time. So let's dive further into how I like to use it when anchoring to the top, from the top of a base. So first things first, the top of the base really starts back here. But the reason that I have it anchored here is because this is really where, to me, from the top of the base, the sellers took control. This is kind of the key sell day where, from this point forward, if we're just kind of scrolling back in time, we're in an uptrend, we're forming a consolidation. It actually looks like we're going to break out to the upside. Instead, we break downwards, break the lows of this short-term shelf, and start this downtrend. So that's why I've chosen to anchor it to that bar in particular. It's a little bit of a judgment call. Anchoring it is kind of the art in using this tool. But as you get more used to it, you'll start to notice certain situations, certain tweaks that you might personally want to make that can help you pick that anchoring point. But that's where I like to anchor it when the selling really takes hold. And then I'm just looking to see, where is the tide turning within this base? When are buyers taking control again? And when does that happen? That doesn't happen here because we fade back below the Anchored VWAP. Instead, it happens here where we really break out, actually form the short-term range above the moving average, and even using it as support right in this area. So when we are able to break back above it, once we've got an Anchored VWAP from the top of the base, when we break above it and then retest it and we're supported, we kind of start living above it. That's when buyers really take hold, and that can often be a really good spot to enter and try to find, tight ranges, other entry tactics, that lead to a potential move just like this. So that's the first place where I like to anchor Anchored VWAPs to. The second place I like to anchor VWAPs to is what we already did, which is kind of the bottom of a base. And I drew accidentally a few dots here. What I want to do is click Anchor VWAP, and then right here. So from kind of a defined bottom, potentially in a base, what I like to do is anchor VWAP at kind of the reversal day. And this could be a very bad down day. It could be, an up day like this where we reverse higher after pushing lower. But after a few days have formed and it looks like this is potentially the bottom of a basing process, I like to anchor a VWAP there. And then what I'm looking for is an undercut and reclaim of that level. This level may not be respected exactly to the penny, but often when we undercut it and close back above it, it can be a really good entry point, or just a sign that buyers are, retaking control, and this reversal was a good one. And buyers are in control in the short term, and we want to be aligning our actions, our thought processes, with that fact that from this reversal down at the bottom of this base, buyers have now stepped in. So let's go ahead now and keep moving forward. To use another example, we've got another base forming after an uptrend. You can see that this Anchored VWAP actually, identifies a level where accumulation is kind of coming into. But even if we didn't see this Anchored VWAP, and let's go ahead and close that one out, we can go ahead and do a fresh plot. So first things first, this base is started. Let's say we're in this area. We see that, the tide has kind of turned. We've kind of broken this channel, and we can go ahead and draw an Anchored VWAP from this level. At that point, you can see its resistance here and here. And we start to see, again, a trend where sellers are in control and we're just in that basing process. However, as we go, we're seeing potential reversals, right here. If we go ahead and identify it after you're a few days in, maybe draw an Anchored VWAP. And we see a little sustained rally above that point, but we lose it right here. So at that point, it no longer becomes relevant, and we're looking for that next kind of key reversal. And that happens on this day where we have a pretty bad selling bar, but kind of don't progress any further. And at that point, as we start pushing up, we can go ahead and draw in that Anchored VWAP, and actually draw it in the actual low here. And you can see that acts as support here, as well as here on the short-term pullback. So these can be points to accumulate positions, and just manage risk against as well, on reversal days as the stock forms higher lows up the right-hand side. So that's kind of the second level that I really like to anchor VWAPs to. All right, so the third point that I want to talk about anchoring Anchored VWAPs to in this video was on earnings dates, and really the earnings day reaction the next day. So here we've got ELF, one of the top performers of last year. It had multiple earnings gap, and we'll kind of go through a few here and talk about what happened. But this is a very key event. This is where kind of supply and demand dynamics really shift. So that's kind of where we want to think about anchoring our Anchored VWAPs to, is spots where there's a definite trend change or there's a really key price and volume characteristic, and earnings gaps definitely fit the bill. So here we've got one off the bottom of this base, and what we're looking for is kind of two different situations. Sometimes we'll push up, kind of pull back, retest it. This acts as support, and we kind of build the trend from there and just kind of push off of it and never really undercut it. But similar to kind of the higher low undercut, you often get a pretty good entry point if we undercut the Anchored VWAP and then kind of close above it. And you can see we form a little bit of a range here and finally push off, but we're in general looking for that undercut of the Anchored VWAP and then reclaim. So from that point forward, you could have entered in this area. And let's go to the next earnings gap, which we can draw in right here. This is the earnings reactions. You can see it finds support in this area 1, 2, 3 times. So it can be spots to add in a short-term swing trade. But we get another kind of undercut and reclaim pattern here where we have a sharp undercut, and then we reclaim it pretty fast as well, form a range right against that level. You can see out support throughout this entire range. And that's when we really push off and move forward. To show one more here, earnings gap, earnings reaction, undercut and reclaim. So depending on kind of the character of a stock, you might get an undercut, you might just find support here and push off of, but this remains a really key level in the weeks after an earnings gap, just because it's such a big shift in supply and demand. And on those undercuts, you can even kind of add another Anchored VWAP, because this becomes another kind of potential trend change point. And that can become relevant later on in a stock's life cycle as it trends there for you. We've got another Anchored VWAP. Let's go ahead and draw that in. Undercut and reclaim, retest, found support here, and then had another gap up, found support right here on this pullback. So you can see how these can become key levels. And just like a 50 SMA, which often acts as support as well, it's not going to happen perfectly to the penny every time. We might undercut it, live below it for a few days, reclaim it. It just becomes a level of interest that you should be aware of as you trade, as a spot where maybe you want to put on position when the stock shows respect for it, or just a spot where you want to manage risk and define your trend using these levels. So that's the other spot, which is really good to use Anchored VWAPs. The last spot I want to mention is actually on the intraday time frame on key breakouts. And let's go ahead and look at a 5-minute chart of FSLR. And on a breakout day, you can draw an Anchored VWAP again from the spot where this supply and demand characteristics really change. And when does that happen? On kind of the first bar of the day, where we see often a lot of volume. And what you want to look for is very similar to the earnings gap. We can watch for respect for it, a mini base to form above it, and kind of a breakout. This could have been another entry after a stock showed respect for it, or we've got an undercut and reclaim. So very similar to the earnings gap setup. You could use it very similarly on an intraday basis to kind of cheat the opening range breakout and get in a little bit earlier. And during a breakout, this is kind of what you want to see throughout the day, just a clean trend above the Anchored VWAP, because this level on an intraday basis with large institutions kind of looking to accumulate stock, a lot of them use the daily volume weighted average price, which on an intraday basis is the same as the Anchored VWAP, anchored to the first bar of the day. A lot of them use that for algorithms and strategies to pick up stock. And as the stock gets closer to the average price, they're trying to, build, get their fills. And even on undercuts and reclaims, they're trying to get even better prices. So this becomes a key level that you can watch throughout the day. And when a stock can show a sustained trend above the Anchored VWAP throughout the day, that really shows a very, very strong breakout. And on FSLR, we even had fall through again today, where we did retest it, kind of the second bar here on this day, but then we never really looked back. But oftentimes we get an initial push up, then we get a trend back, and we kind of build a base here, around 130, and then we push off into the end of the day. But that Anchor VWAP becomes a key level of support as we form an intraday base. So that's pretty much it in terms of the setups and strategies that I want to cover today. This is just kind of a very brief overview. Let me know down below if you want me to go even more in depth, show a lot more examples. I'd be happy to do so. But hopefully this helps you out. And again, to access the Anchor VWAP, you want to go to your drawing tools, navigate down to the fifth one from the top, and it's right there, Anchored VWAP. And you can go ahead and click the star here to favorite it and have it show up in your favorite drawings for quick access to draw Anchored VWAPs to your heart's content. So that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you found this interesting and helpful. If you did, please go ahead and leave a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Check out that special 2 months for $39 promotion that we're currently doing. That's linked down below in the description, as well as popping up right now if you haven't yet tried out Deepvue. And with that, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in future videos. Take care.